We're in Daniel chapter 7, I think. The lights would help my eyes a little bit. I can squint, whatever. But we're into first, okay, that's good. Yeah, give me a little light. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 14. You say, wow, we're only doing half a chapter at a time. But there's a lot in here, and we do have communion today. So, but let's go ahead and begin. We see we have, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. And you remember now, Belshazzar was the one. Thank you, David.
Madness getting it to stay.
I'll hold it. I get one of these that's got water in it, like a squirt gun also. But Belshazzar, you remember this is he's recalling back because Belshazzar was defeated by Cyrus and Darius, another name for Cyrus, and he's going back to a time when he had a vision, and this happens between chapters 4 and 5, but it's a very important vision he's going back to and recalling. He said he had a dream and visions of his head. Yeah, well, that's usually where you get stuff in your head. While on his bed. Okay. When you're a king, you get to do what you want. You can sleep in till noon or whatever, 1 o'clock. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. The four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here, but just hold on and you'll see how it fits together. Suddenly another beast, a second like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. They said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible. It doesn't say what it was, it just says it was dreadful and terrible, exceeding strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little horn, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was like a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. I watched then, because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and the body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. And as we said, Daniel is divided into two parts. You have chapters 1 through chapter 6, where it was written in Hebrew, actually, and it deals with Daniel's life, the historical part. Now, Daniel didn't have vision, but he interpreted visions of these kings. Now, in chapters 7 through 12, we're dealing more with Daniel's visions and their prophecy. So we see then that this is a very important part, very incredible part of prophecy in the scriptures. And it's been said that if we didn't have the book of Daniel, we couldn't really understand Revelation fully. And it's another book that's called the Apocryphal books. Zechariah is the third one of the minor prophets, those three. And so there's a very basic things in here, but it seems complicated, so let's break it down. Don't get burdened with the words. Think about the big picture which Daniel is speaking. There in verses 1 through 8, there's this vision of the four beasts. Daniel's first vision that he will have in this last part of the book of Daniel. There's the first year of Belshazzar. And he was the king, as we said, that was the fifth and final king of Babylon. Remember, he had Nebuchadnezzar, and then those short-lived kings, and then Nabonidus was the father of Belshazzar, and it said that he was a co-regent. He was one that ruled with his father, and he would assume the throne. Now this is 14 years before the fall of Babylon, this vision. So keep in mind, when we were in the previous chapter where it said that Cyrus came in, and remember they were having that big party with thousands, and while they were having the party, Darius the Mede came in and dammed up the river, and all of a sudden it dried up, and they just went right in and took over the city of Babylon, though they thought they could not be defeated and that they had fought about everything. Big, wide walls to protect them. But of course we know that God causes people to rule. He brings up kings and he puts them down. And so this vision, as I said, happens between chapters 4 and 5 of Daniel. Now, in chapter 8, it's also going to take us back to the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, where Daniel has a second vision. He's going to go back again. Chapter 9, we're going to see that Daniel discovers the writings of the prophet Jeremiah, and he has a third vision. And in chapters 10 through 12, we're going to see he has a fourth vision. This is actually during the reign of Cyrus, when Belshazzar was dethroned, and Cyrus, or Darius, same person, was reigning. So we're going to see these four visions. Now, so Daniel's looking back. He's remembering these four beasts while on his bed. Verse 2 says the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. Now, the poet Homer spoke of the four winds of heaven. It was something that was known during this time. Some people think it speaks about the four corners of the earth and the spirits of the four corners of the earth. Some people are trying to say, oh, it's these four generals that are going to emerge during the Grecian Empire. There were four generals. And see, all this is given so that we can look back in history and we can say, yes, this happened just the way history followed. And it predicted very accurately what was to take place. So the vision of the four beasts. The main vision here is in verses 3 through 8. And verse 3 says, I saw a great sea. Some people think it means the Mediterranean Sea. Some people think it's a sea of people. But this sea is actually a picture of the bottomless pit, the abyss. In Revelation 11:7, it says this beast will come up out of the sea. And, the sea, the bottomless pit, because that's what it's speaking of here. The bottomless pit, the abyss. And interestingly enough, you have Satan, you have the beast, which Satan gives power to, and then you're going to have this little horn, this Antichrist. It's kind of like a trinity of Satan that are taking part in all this. And this beast coming up out of this pit, a bottomless pit, and he's going to kill the two witnesses. You probably have heard about and maybe debated these two witnesses which go about preaching to those that remain on the earth that are alive during the tribulation period. Some people say it's Moses and Elijah. Some people say it's Enoch and Elijah. And then some people say we don't know. It's just two witnesses. But a lot of people do think it's Enoch and Elijah, mainly because they never saw death. Enoch walked with God. God took him. He was not, because God took him. And of course, Elijah was caught up in a chariot of fire. He didn't see death. So they will, if those are the two ones, they will see death during this time when the beast comes out of the bottomless pit. But here's what it says in Revelation 7:1 exactly. The witness, it tells us that the witnesses could not die until they completed their prophecy of 1260 days. And when they had finished their testimony, it says, when they finish their testimony, that's when the beast will come up out and kill them. Now, it's interesting to look at where will this beast come from? From what group of people? Now, there have been a couple different views about this. A lot of people point to these 10 toes as a revived Roman Empire, a group of people that will come out of the 10 countries in Europe. These 10 countries. And they say the Antichrist will come from there. And the whole question is, if that's true, is he alive today? Many people believe it this way. When it says, now there are many antichrists in the world, some people believe that there could have been an antichrist raised up at any time in human history. The reason they believe that is because that they say the return of the Lord could happen at any time. And if he could have come at any time, then there would have had to have been an Antichrist that could have been raised up at one time. In other words, when he said there are many Antichrists in the world, and that's something we have to consider. Why why is God, delaying his coming? Well, it's God's mercy. He's wanting us, the church, to get as many people into the kingdom of God as we can. Because when he comes, the chances will be over. Now, this is a 10-nation confederacy. Verse 24, next week, is going to talk about that 10 nation. Now, verse 3 said, the four great beasts came up from the sea. And in verse 17, we'll get to next week, it talks about these four beasts or four kings. The fourth beast, a fourth kingdom. Now, there are many people that have speculated. Some people talk about these animals that are mentioned in verse 4. The first was like a lion. Some people have said that that's England. The bear, Russia. The leopard represents the Arab states. a Muslim confederacy, and that the 10 horns speak of Rome or revived Roman Empire. Now, if you remember back in chapter 2, there was a giant statue that Nebuchadnezzar had a vision of. The head was of gold, the arms, the chest and arms of silver. And some people think, well, this is a parallel. It's looking back. Those four there. The belly and the thigh of brass was the Grecian. The legs of iron, the Roman Empire. The 10 toes, a revived Roman Empire. The Roman Empire went a long time, from 231, from invasion of Syria, way until 2,000 years later. They were destroyed from within. And so we have to be careful about our nation. Nothing can bring us down, but we can destroy ourselves. So going back to chapter 2, this speaks of these people who look at, there's a view that says that these animals represent certain kingdoms. Now the lion, they say, is Babylon. And the bear is the Medo-Persian Empire. The leopard is the Grecian Empire. We're going back to these same four that we found in chapter 2. The fourth, it says, different from the rest. And this is the Roman and revived Roman Empire together. There was a large gap between the two. Now it's interesting because we see in Europe now, we see a lot of Muslims coming in, even in the United States. But this lion, Babylon, is the modern day Iraq. And the bear is the area of the Medo-Persian Empire. It's the modern day Iran. And the leopard is the Grecian. It's an area of Mesopotamia and Turkey. See, we think maybe Turkey is an ally, but what is it going to be in the end times? See, these three major empires, to this day, they're 99.9% Muslim there. So this possibly means, there's an interpretation, that this little horn, this Antichrist, comes from a confederacy of all Muslim nations. We saw the caliphate that was established, that group of Muslims over there in Syria. And they thought it a very important thing to establish their own country. They wanted it to be their own country. Now they truly believe that they're going to establish a place, and they believe they're going to win out in the end. And of course they say, you'll have many people say this. In fact, Bush 43 said this: Muslims are a peaceful religion. They're peaceful. I think he was being hopeful that they would be peaceful, because if you read the Quran, there's not anything about peace. In fact, they did a survey, and 20% of Muslims said that jihad is okay. That's 1 out of 5. How many are in the world? And you take a fifth of those. And so that caliphate, and look what happened. Maybe God is just restraining for a while. He brings in a president that goes in there and wipes the place out. They said we could have defeated them. They were lined up. We could have bombed them all before it ever started, back under Obama. But Trump comes in, wipes them out, and they don't have that possibility anymore. There's a war going on. There's a battle that's raging. And it's hastening to the day of the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. We're going to see at the end here how he comes from heaven. So, It is true, Westerners have believed the Antichrist was going to come from Europe, but there's another view that he comes out of the Muslim nations. In Revelation 13, we see the Antichrist will come onto the scene, and he'll offer a false peace. And he's going to establish a one-world government, a one-world money system, and a one-world religion. This major religion, the world is seeing Islam, the Muslims, gains strength and numbers. There's another view that says that this represents, these countries represent like a single beast, but it's not real popular. So then it says there's 7 heads. Well, this goes back to 7 nations, 7 world empires. You have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Grecian, Roman, a revived Roman, which takes us into the tribulation period. This is all of world history it's talking about now. And so the 10 horns are kings of the 10 nations. It's going to say that in verse 24 of Daniel next week, God willing. Possibly an Islamic confederacy. And what happens here is Satan transfers power and authority to the beast. He will empower these 10 confederate nations. They'll rise up and be a world-dominating force. So the first beast like a lion, reign of Nebuchadnezzar. The lion, royal power. There's a lot about lions in the Old Testament. Solomon had statues of 12 lions on the sides leading up to his throne in 1 Kings 10:12. It talks about Nebuchadnezzar being humbled, and Nebuchadnezzar was humbled before God. You remember Daniel chapter 4, where he was put in the field, and he had dew on his back, and his fingernails became claws. It says until he gave glory to the God of heaven. Verse 5, the second beast, the bear, Medo-Persian Empire. Bear is ferocious, powerful, less majestic than a lion. Now, interestingly, in Revelation 13:2, the beast has the feet of a bear. And it says the bear raised itself up on one side. That's a sign that the Persians were much more powerful than the Medes, but they had a combined empire. And so that's what it means when it says it raised itself up on one side. Now, a bear is a symbol of the governmental and military conquest. It has the ribs. It talks about conquering, eating much flesh. Now, this empire, the Medo-Persians, continued 200 years till Alexander the Great began to conquer in 336 BC. So, verse 6, the leopard, the third beast, the Grecian Empire. So that leopard is swift, and it's one of the most feared animals in the Old Testament times. It talks about it in Habakkuk 1:8. The horses, where it says the horses of the Chaldeans were described as swifter than leopards. 4 heads. This third empire, Grecian, will have 4 governmental leaders. And in fact, in history, we do know that this particular rule, there were 4 generals that came to rule. Now, verse 7 of chapter 7. After this I saw in the night visions, behold, a 4th beast. It just says this beast was dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue at his feet. It was different from all the others. Until this is this 4th beast with 10 horns. So Rome began the occupation of Sicily in the year, I think I said Syria earlier, but Sicily in the year 241. So Rome conquered Spain and Carthage and then moved east to Macedonia, to Greece, Asia Minor. Rome extended its conquest to Britain, France, Belgium, Switzerland, and Germany. And they went clear until 1453. So this is over 1212 years until conquered by Muhammad II. Now, Christ spoke in Matthew 24:15, talked about this desecration of the temple that would be completed by Rome. And some people who deny that Daniel is inspired by God, they want to say that this goes back to Antiochus Epiphanes, way back, that it already happened, and everything. And they try to take the book of Daniel as being not inspired of God. They're all things that people come up with theories. Now, the premillennial return of Christ, which premillennial means that I guess we can either listen or listen to that. I see that. Can he hear
So
if I mute it?
Right now,
They cannot
mine
see.
is picking up sound.
Not picking up sound.
Mine is.
And his is too?
His is what keeps overpowering.
Okay.
See, like,
All right.
see, it's his.
I'm getting hungry. I'm thinking some sandwiches. But anyway, all right, let's get on and finish up here. So, what the premillennial return of Christ is, it means that before this 1,000-year millennium, that Christ will return, and then there'll be a rapture. Rapture is talked about. Now, the second part of the second coming is spoken of in Zechariah, where it says, he comes in the clouds, and every eye shall see him. They that pierced him, and all the nations will wail because of him. So there's going to be two parts of this second coming. But before Christ returns, there's going to be a 1,000-year reign here in between these. And now, verse 8, this little horn. There's a little horn that grows in chapter 8. It's different from this little horn. This little horn is speaking of an antichrist. Now, interestingly, after he sees these visions of the four beasts, he begins to see the vision of the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man. The Ancient of Days, of course. Isn't that a cool name for God? It's Ancient Days. In other words, God never had a beginning. He'll never have an end. He is the Ancient of Days. I love the song. It says, Ancient of Days, you're worthy of all praise. And the Son of Man, speaking of Jesus. Verse 9 says, the Ancient of Days. This phrase is only used in the Bible in chapter 7 of Daniel. It's also repeated in verses 13 and 22. Now, this depiction of God as a fiery flame is used in the Old Testament. It is a symbol of judgment. And it's found, look at Psalm 97 when you get home. Now, look at the picture that happens here in Revelation 1:14 and 15. Speaking of Christ, it says, his head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. There's no doubt here. He's seeing a vision of the final days. The final days. Verse 10. The court was seated. So there's a court. And it says in Revelation 20:12, this is John on the Isle of Patmos when he's given the revelation of Jesus Christ. It says, I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books. Now, interestingly, we are saved by grace, plus nothing, minus nothing. But it says we'll be judged according to our works. That tells us our works soon follow after the true faith that is in our lives. And so it can be said, God will see our works. Our works tell whether or not we belong to God. And so God is getting ready to judge the works of the Antichrist during the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. First 3.5, the Antichrist brings peace. But then he desecrates the temple. 3.5 years that follow, Christ is going to judge his works. Into verse 10, as you can see, the books are opened. Now, it's believed that this judgment here in verse 10 of Daniel 7 refers to, like I said, the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ when he comes back to judge the nations. First, coming in a rapture, 1,000 years, he's coming back where every eye shall see him. And they'll say to the mountains, fall on us, and hide us from the face of the Lamb. Now, we can see from a verse here in Matthew, in fact, 2 verses, 25, 33 to 34, what exactly is going to happen in this judgment. It says he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. I'll do it this way, right hand and left for you. Then the king will say to those on the right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. That's a great and wonderful thing for those who have received Jesus. The sad part, though, comes down further in the chapter. That verse 41, then he will also say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and its angels. Fire was prepared for the devil and his angels, never meant for mankind. God would have, and Christ would have all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth and to not go to the lake of fire. And interestingly, when they say cast into the lake of fire, many places in the Bible describe hell as a place of everlasting punishment, of fiery flames, but a place where there's falling. There's a constant falling that a person is engaged in. I hate falling, you know. I'm getting old enough to where I'm falling and I can't get up. But I don't like falling. I don't like those dreams that I have, you know, as a kid where I was in a tree, this big tree. We used to climb these big ones. And I'd fall out of the tree. And then before I hit the ground, I'd wake up. I was like, man, that's the worst feeling. But I would not want to be in a place like this. So now the destruction of the beast happens. Verse 11, the beast was slain and given to the burning fire. It talks about these three beasts, possibly the kingdoms of Babylon, Persia, and Greece. Their power was taken away. So they become one. These four become one. The final beast, Jesus Christ, will destroy. And it says, he will destroy them with the breath of his mouth and brightness of his coming. So they will burn in the lake of fire for all eternity. So it says they continue. This has confused some people. Verse 12. How could those three kingdoms continue? Well, they continued for a time when they were conquered, and then the new ruler would come on. There's no contradiction here. Then we have the vision after the Ancient of Days of the Son of Man. Verses 13 and 14. This speaks of Jesus Christ. Even though Daniel referred to himself as the Son of Man one time, not the same here. Jesus used this title more than any other title of himself. And think about that. He's the Son of God, but he's the Son of Man. Son of God talks about his deity. And then Son of Man speaks of his humanity. He spoke more of himself as identifying with us than he did even the title Son of God. Now the kingdom, verse 14, was given to Jesus. Now think about this. Colossians 1:16 says, "For by him, Jesus, all things were created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him." He made the world. And it doesn't mean that God is more powerful than Christ. They're equal. Some people would take this from it because he gives them the power. But Christ humbled himself and came and became a man, the God-man. It says here that he'll be given a temporal kingdom. He'll come back to the earth. He'll judge the nations. He'll establish a millennial kingdom. The 1,000-year reign of Christ. Revelation 24, if you want to look at that a little later on when you get home. He'll have an eternal kingdom. Satan will be released a little while. He's going to gather the nations together. This group of Muslim nations, perhaps. They're going to be empowered by Satan. And he's going to wage war against Jesus Christ. He has a name on his thigh, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Of course, Satan cannot defeat him. That's what Satan thought back in Ezekiel. He said, "I will be like the Most High." Well, he can't be. And of course, he's soundly defeated. He's a loser. He's a liar and a loser. He's cast into the lake of fire, Revelation 20:15, called the second death. And interestingly, 2 Peter 3:10 tells us what will happen at this time. It says, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise. The elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up." It's all going to be gone. If you're relying upon anything in this world, it's going to be burned up. You're not going to have it in your possession. Better to make your investments in heaven. There's going to be a new heaven, a new earth, and the Bible tells us a new Jerusalem descending down, and all the other things gone. Now, the final part of the message is 2 Peter 3:11. "Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness?" That tells us, right? It's gone anyway. In our walk, we should serve God. Our conversation, that's what it means. The way we live our lives. Hey, this thing goes forever and ever. I'm going to get this out and get it ready for Kavika. He's going to come up here. And except for the fact that probably when I went to the restroom, I put the button on the other side of it. Okay, we have Kavika coming up for communion, but we want to have an invitation before the communion. Let's just have a small invitation. And since the time is getting away from us, we're just going to have an invitation with silence. And you'll stand for a minute. It's out of the ordinary, but God wants us to do something out of the ordinary sometimes. And that is